Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary Jacobs. Welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we're filming at the Cablevision/Alt Studios in Hauppauge, New York. Today, my guest is David McPhie from House of Bagels in Commack, right here on Long Island. I personally love my bagels. I don't get to be like this from eating salad every day, but I am a big fan of bagels, to be honest with you. I love them everywhere I go. I check out different bagel stores. I go all over the island. I travel a lot, and my absolute best bagel store is House of Bagels right here in Commack. And over the years of going there, I got to know my next guest, Dave, the owner, and his head baker, Ed Keller, and we'll show a little bit of him later in the store baking. So I finally said, you know what? After I'm talking to Dave, there's a lot of backstory to the business. So a couple things that bother me about bagels are when the hole is too big. That really annoys me, because when I put my cream cheese on and it falls right through the hole, that's ridiculous, and I feel like I'm getting ripped off. I also don't like, to me, a bagel's got a different taste. And when you go to like a Dunkin' Donuts and you get a bagel, it's basically a round piece of bread. And that really annoys me too. I also like the crust just right, the right amount of seeds. So I'm very picky. So the fact that you have my bagel business is really good. So Dave, welcome to Long Island Backstory.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, first let's start off the basics, give a little bit of background here. How long have you owned the House of Bagels?
Well, it's about 33 years, but a couple of years ago, I was with my ex-wife, and I kept saying, well, I've owned this store for 29 years. And she's saying, why are you saying 29 years? It's about 33 years. I said, well, I always say 29 because when a Scotsman says 33, they have difficulty understanding me, you know?
So it's been 29 years.
So it's been 29 years.
Well, hopefully, when you pass the 33, so now 34 has got to be.
Well, 34.
All the 30s are a problem?
Yeah, all the 30s are a problem.
So we got to get to the 40s. Right. So now, actually, that brings me to my next question, which you're saying like that. So your accent, is that a Brooklyn accent? Because
it is a Brooklyn accent.
Okay.
I mean, I was born in Glasgow, in Scotland. Moved to a small town on the west coast called Troon. Now, Troon's well known for its golf. Like, they had the British Open Championship there 2 years ago, and I used to caddy on that course every Saturday. And I actually caddied. Well, I didn't caddy. I was a steward out on the course in 1962.
What's a steward? Someone like a flight attendant who carries drinks to the people?
White. Yeah. I'm carrying a flag. I was directing people to cross the fairways and what have you. That was about 15, 16 years of age at the time. And you got to see all the players. And I think Arnold Palmer won it in 1962. So that was an experience in itself.
Now, did you serve bagels to the people playing golf? Is there even bagels in Scotland?
Nobody even heard of a bagel at that time. I believe there are now 2 bagel stores in Glasgow. They sell these bagels, these frozen bagels from Lenders. They come frozen.
Is that a real bagel?
No, not really. It doesn't.
It's just round.
It's round with a hole. It does have the hole though. So.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them. So how did you get from Scotland to Commack, New York?
Well, I went into marine engineering, so I'm a marine engineer, and I was indentured to the Cunard Steamship Company for, and went to college. I sailed on the old Queen Elizabeth. That was my first ship I ever sailed on, the old Queen Elizabeth to New York. And in New York, I picked up the passenger ship called the Franconia. And the Franconia ran on the New York to Bermuda run for 1 year. And that was a tremendous experience. Fell in love with Bermuda. I would recommend Bermuda to anybody. And from there, I was then spent 5 years actually on the Queen Elizabeth II.
Just going back and forth?
Well, this was on the North Atlantic run in the summer months. We'd leave New York, arrive in Southampton, England, stay overnight, and then 5 days back to New York. And then in the winter months, we'd do cruises down to the Caribbean with the occasional world cruise thrown in. So I've been basically all around the world. There was about maybe 3 places that I never got to. I never got to Japan, never got to New Zealand, never got to Australia. These are 3 places I would like to have gone to.
And
I've
you were how old then?
been everybody else. Early
You were
20s.
20s.
Early 20s.
Sounds like a good job for somebody in their 20s.
Yep. And then I met my wife. She was on a cruise on the Queen Elizabeth II, and the fact that the ship was in New York every 10 days, we started dating.
Now, I don't want to get you in trouble, but was the crew allowed to date passengers?
But very much so.
Was it encouraged?
Well, only the officers and gentlemen. I'm no longer a gentleman, but they encouraged us to mix with the passengers, and we were all dressed up in our uniforms, and we were allowed to dance and go to the movies, and so that was something that they encouraged.
So you met your wife, and she
was
from here, from Long Island?
Well, she's from Greenpoint, Brooklyn.
Okay.
Greenpoint, Brooklyn. You know. So one thing led to another, and eventually we fell in love and got married. And we actually got married in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and had the reception at Tavern on the Green in Central Park. And we sort of arranged it so that the Queen Elizabeth II was in port at that time. And we had all the engineering officers attending my wedding reception.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
So
I mean, that's like a storybook wedding. So you guys still married today?
No.
So much for a storybook wedding, Dave. You're on the right show. Let's switch gears here. Let's talk about divorce.
Fortunately, I got on well with my ex-wife, and we were married 25 years.
But all joking aside, you still have a good relationship.
Still
with your
have a
wife,
good
right?
relationship.
So now get off the show, because this is only for people who really don't have a good relationship.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us, the Long Island Backstory. Okay, so you end up, you meet your wife, you get married, but you're still an engineer, right?
Still an engineer, but at that point, I'm now looking for a shoreside job. So I eventually got a job in Scotland for a company called Imperial Tobacco. Now, they were making a brand new plant, synthetic tobacco, and it didn't really take off. So after a year or two, the writing was on the wall. It wasn't going to survive. So at that time, well, I should maybe say once we get married, I went into smuggling. My wife had a beautiful Samoyed dog called Tundra. And we had to get this dog into Scotland because there was a quarantine law at that time. I forget whether it was 6 months or a year, but any animal coming into the United Kingdom had to go into quarantine, for the rabies. You see. So we arranged for the dog to fly to Paris, and then put on another plane to Brest in the west coast of France. And in the meantime, I had arranged for a gentleman who owned a World War II motor torpedo boat without the torpedoes. And we crossed the English Channel, and we were able to hook up with the dog and come back to the west coast of England, to Cornwall. And we went ashore on a rowing boat with this dog sitting on its backside with its paws up on my shoulders, and about 8 cases of wine which she was smuggling in.
Wow! So you were so after you got married, you got her to move to Scotland.
Yeah, she came to Scotland, and we lived in Scotland for 4 years. And the one thing about Scotland that she always complained about was the rain. You know, when Americans come over, they say, what beautiful green pastures, you know. I said, well, it's because it freaking rains all the time, you know.
She didn't like the rain.
She didn't like the rain. She said it was 4 years of frizzy hair, you know.
Okay, so what made you end up coming back here?
What made us come back
Can't
here?
Get to Brooklyn out somebody, huh?
No. That's another thing about the accent. You know, Americans say, so it's nice that you've retained your Scottish accent. I go back home and they say, boy, you got a real Yankee accent, you know?
You're not losing that, Dave.
Yeah. So, we could see the writing on the wall with this factory that was closing down. We thought, let's go to the States, and we'll try our hand at States. So we came back to the States. I worked at Drake's Bakery across from the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Drake's like those the prepackaged cupcakes,
right.
Stuff like that.
And I got a job there as a maintenance supervisor. And then somebody said to me, well, why don't you, well, in the meantime, we bought a house out on the island, and somebody said, well, why don't you go work for Entenmann's? I had never heard of Entenmann's. So I applied there. It was a great operation, and I worked for the Entenmann brothers that owned Entenmann's for one day, and they sold it to Warner Lambert. And that was for, I don't know, 2-3 years. And then Warner Lambert sold it to General Foods. And then Philip Morris bought it from General Foods. And then the Bimbo Baking Company of Mexico bought it, or Canada. So it was, but it's now.
But you weren't baking.
I wasn't baking. I knew nothing about baking. Like I became a maintenance manager
on the ovens and
machinery. I had 27 guys working for me on the repair of the equipment and what have you. So that was that. In the meantime, my wife became very friendly with a neighbor, and her husband actually owned a bagel store, and which was the House of Bagels, and he had been there for 9 years, and he was looking to move to Florida, so he was looking to sell it, and we thought, well, it was a good opportunity to get into business for ourselves. So that's how we ended up buying the bagel store.
Yeah. So I read an article that you had, I think you have it in the store, several years ago, and you said that buying the bagel store was one of the biggest mistakes of your life. So now that you've been around for so long and you're so successful, has that changed now?
No, it was the biggest mistake in my life.
Still is. Still is. Why do you say it's the biggest mistake?
It's a tough. I was in a very good job at Entenmann's. I had a good pension. I had everything was chugging along. But when you go into the bagel business, everything's got to be fresh every day. It's not an easy life. Every weekend is very busy. Every holiday is busy. Now, we have never closed in 33 years, with the exception of Hurricane Sandy. We didn't have any power for 4 or 5 days. And Hurricane Irene, which came shortly afterwards, that was 3 days without power. But other than that, we have been open every single day.
So you're married to the business?
Years. Married to the business. And that was part of the problem. It wasn't the whole problem, but part of the problem was with my wife. I was constantly working. Right. And she said...
But sometimes it helps the relationship.
Yeah. Well, she even said, even if I didn't have the bagel store, when I worked for Entenmann's, I was a bit of a workaholic. I worked long hours. So, it all adds up. They say you should work on a marriage every day. Is that true?
You're talking to the person who's been divorced and does a show about divorce. So pretty much if I give advice to anybody on marriage, listen to it very intently and do the opposite thing, everybody. So don't take my advice on marriage, David. Maybe some, eating bagels, things like that. I can give you some advice. So let's get a little bit into about bagels, because when I was doing my research, there's actually a lot about bagels. First of all, there's definitely a huge difference in bagel stores, and not many of them stay in business as long as you guys did. And you have huge lines. I mean, lines out. Luckily, I have connections. I go in the back door sometimes. But you guys have huge lines there all the time, and anybody who knows knows you guys have good bagels. So what makes a good bagel store?
Well, there's two different processes that are well known. One is, we start from scratch. We mix the raw ingredients. We have a bagel machine where we produce the bagel. We actually boil the bagel.
Not everybody boils bagels?
No, there is such a thing as a rack oven, where it's a steel rack with steel boards. The bagels are all put onto steel trays, and the whole rack is pushed into the oven. Heat is applied to proof the bagels up. Then you have steam jets that come in, which is supposed to do the same thing as boiling.
Like that.
And then the heat comes on for the oven, and the oven is baked. In the meantime, the rack is being rotated inside the oven. That system has been around for a long time, but you can always tell the difference. It ends up more like being a piece of bread.
That's what I say. I have no idea how Dunkin' Donuts makes their bagels, but when I go there, to me, it's a round piece of bread. There's nothing. I don't know what it is. To me, the bagels in your store and other good bagel stores, the outside is like a crustiness to it, and the inside is more dough. It's a different dough. It's not a bread dough. I thought that's what made a bagel, other than the shape, was the boiling. And that's why you can't make a good
Well,
bagel in Florida.
yeah.
Because the water, they say, is not the same, right?
Right. I mean, Long Island, there's 3 aquifers on Long Island, and Long Island is basically sand. So the water is very soft on Long Island. Whereas normally when you have calcium and magnesium, and that's when you get a harder water. Even New York City, the water's coming from upstate. Right. That's very soft water. So all the time people say to you, well, it's the water. You know, possibly
right.
It is the water. You know, it's
because you can't get a good bagel
water.
in Florida.
Yeah, yeah. I actually know somebody in Florida that actually set up a water treatment plant. You know, to
try to simulate
to simulate the water. Yeah. But that's part of it. You know.
Now, the other thing is that I noticed about your bagels, so I know another one in Queens I've seen do the same thing, is that you cook on planks of wood.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't
it looks like a lot of work.
I wouldn't call them planks of wood, like.
What are they? 2x4s?
Well, that's exactly what they are. 2x4s.
Are they really?
And they're 2x4s, and there's burlap stapled to the top of the board, and we have 2 sets of boards. Once we boil the bagels, we lay them out on these boards. Now, sometimes you pre-seed them. Obviously, if it's a plain bagel, you don't pre-seed it. And then we put the seeds on the top of the bagel as well. We're going into a rack oven. We're going to a rotary oven.
Right.
And I have a universal oven that's 5 shelves. It's what they call a 20-pan shelf. So we're putting 6 dozen bagels into the oven at one time. That gets rotated 1 revolution. We then flip the bagel off the board and take the board back out. The reason we're doing that obviously is you don't want the bagel sticking to the hearth of the shelf. You know, you don't want to stick to the shelf.
So that's the purpose of the.
That's the purpose of the boards,
okay.
just so that the bagel does not stick to it's dried out by the time you flip it. And you know, when we start baking in the morning, it's a continuous bake. It's 1 shelf in, and then you move the shelf up, and the other shelf's coming out, and it's a continuous bake.
How long do they bake for?
About 8 minutes.
That's it?
Once you flip, yeah, about 8 minutes once you flip. You know,
that's not long at all. It must be a hot oven.
This is one of the well, it's 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is one of the reasons for the hole. There's more surface area. It gets heated. It gets heated quicker. It gets done quicker. You know.
No. What about as far before you put them in? So we'll go back a little bit. What about the hand rolling?
Hand rolling. Well, the previous owner made a living hand rolling. He used to go from store to store in Brooklyn and hand roll the bagel. And I actually, when he was training me, which he gave me 2 weeks of training, but when he was training me, he would show me hand rolling, and he could actually keep up with the bagel machine. It was very impressive. I mean, and perfect bagels, you know. They say you get a slightly better bagel from, you know, it's not compressed as much, the dough. It's and we used to do cinnamon raisin hand rolled. And then eventually we switched to the bagel machine. As soon as we switched to the bagel machine, there was a couple of complaints.
Really? So people didn't notice it?
People noticed it, you know.
But does anybody hand roll anymore? Is it pretty? I mean,
there's a couple of bagel stores out there that still hand roll. There's also bagel factories out there. There's people that supply bagels, you know, in refrigerated trucks to bagel stores. So they're not making the bagel from scratch. They just bring in the rack dough. And they bake off the you know, they bake it off in the oven. Right. So they're missing that whole production process. So but as I say, we start from scratch, and
so that's a lot of work. How many bagels do you make a day? I mean, it looks like thousands.
It is thousands. It's I mean, during the day we're always talking dozens, but I did the arithmetic the other day, and it's about 4,500 bagels a day.
A day, wow. Well, you do a lot of wholesale business, right?
Do a fair amount of wholesale business.
You see all the bags in the morning if I go in, going out.
We're selling to hotels, delis, offices, you know. And that's one good thing with the location. We're right on the edge of the industrial park, you know, so people stop in on the way to the office. Plus you've got a good residential area, and there's a large sort of Jewish community in the area. That's another story. When I was under training, I was checking to see how long we kept the bagels in the kettle, right? So I'm leaning over the kettle and I'm counting 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, and a customer thought I was blessing blessing the water. He thought I was a rabbi, you know. 1, 2.
That's funny.
So that was that.
Jews do love bagels. I don't know why.
I don't know why. I mean, it was actually
Because I don't think the Jews didn't create bagels, right?
well. I mean, there's a whole history to bagels, but I believe it started in Poland and moved from there to.
I mean, to all my non-Jewish friends, I take credit for the bagels. But,
Right,
you know,
right.
I
Okay.
don't think they're buying
Okay,
the.
yeah.
I don't think they're buying the whole story.
Okay.
But let me ask you this. Now, just recently, Cynthia Nixon may have lost the election because, if you remember, in the primary, she was caught putting cream cheese, capers, and lox on a cinnamon raisin bagel. Now, is that sacrilegious? Like, if somebody comes in and orders something crazy like that, do you like? Does anything go?
I never even knew who Cynthia Nixon was till this morning. Okay. And
that's because she did that. She could have been our next governor otherwise.
And as far as the capers go, like we don't have that in my store. And so, I mean, we'll need to try it. We'll need to see what it's like.
Well, which is interesting. You say you don't have the capers because I go to a pizza store in my town, Ciro's Pizza, and they have like regular pizza, pepperoni pizza, and a white pizza, and it's the best pizza I can get.
Right.
And when I go to your store, you don't have every like exotic bagel that's popular right now.
Right.
And if somebody says, "Oh, go in there, get me this, get me this," I say, "Look, they just got the best bagels. Get yourself your cinnamon raisin, get yourself your bialy, your sesame, because they do the best job." Is that on purpose that you don't do all those? Exotic
over the years,
bagels?
we've tried everything. We've tried strawberry, we've tried blueberry, we've tried cinnamon apple, and initially you get a good reaction, like, you know, and people buy them. But then over a period of a few weeks, it just dies off until the point where it's just not worthwhile doing it. We tried a chocolate chip bagel, but it made such a mess of the bagel machine of the belt that we said, to hell with this, like, you know.
So you just do the other bagels, and it doesn't seem to bother your customers.
No. I mean, we do the basics, you know, and you know, we're also into flagels now, and I mean that sold well to begin with, but has sort of died off.
Yeah.
And basically, a flagel is a flattened bagel.
Right.
Originally, people.
But it seems less doughy, but it's the same amount of dough flat.
Yeah. People said, well, buy that because it's less calories. You see.
Right.
But it's not less calories, the same number of calories. It's just a flattened bagel, you know?
So is that your job to step on them in the morning?
Well, yeah. See, in the morning, you see these...
They're walking around banging on the on the flat bagels. But it does have a different taste, I think, because the crust
it's crusty.
Yeah,
you probably get crustier, and people like that, you know? It's terrible to try to slice one open, like, you know?
Yeah.
You got to be careful.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
Now, one of my father used to love bialys, and he used to tell me, you got to go to a place who knows how to make a bialy. And I would always look at it and say, to me, it was a bagel that they stuck some onions in the middle. I had no idea how they could do the hole on the top and the bottom. But what is a bialy? Because you guys make amazing bialys, but they don't taste like regular bagels. They taste
right. Well,
there's a different taste, but they're great.
Well, the one thing is, I mean, the formula is slightly different, but it's not boiled for a start, so it goes straight into the oven hearth. There's a flour base to it. It's what we do is we put poppy seed and soybean oil and onions in the middle. So that's there, and we press down on the middle.
But how do you get the hole in the middle, but it doesn't go all the way through?
Well, there is no hole. There should not be any hole in the bit.
Well, show the bialy over there.
All right, where's the hole?
But it doesn't go all the way through.
No.
So how do you do that?
By hand, you know, just pressing it down and spreading it.
So bialy is almost like a pizza. You got to mold it out.
Got to stretch it. You know?
But then you also make bialy sticks, which I never had.
And we used to have bialy discs as well. You know, so which basically was a flagel, like, you know. But that was many years ago, and that slowly died off. So you know, if things aren't working out, you just move away from it and you try something different.
And we only have a couple seconds left, but in the last couple seconds, I have a couple questions. First, what is the most popular bagel?
A plain bagel. Why
get a plain bagel? You can get a Lendon's if you want a plain bagel.
You know, by 3 to 1. I mean,
really?
The plain bagels fly out the door. The next one is the everything bagel.
So you go from nothing to everything.
Right, nothing to everything.
Nobody's in the middle.
That's it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. And the other thing is, as far as cream cheeses.
Right.
your cream cheese is unbelievable.
Right.
I personally like the vegetable on a sesame sometimes.
Right.
But why do you buy this stuff from a different supplier, or why is your cream cheese?
No, we're buying 50-pound blocks of cream cheese. We're breaking up and whipping it up in the mixer, and
so you actually make the vegetable.
Yeah. I mean, we're not making the cream
base,
cheese,
right.
but we're making the varieties of cream cheeses.
So that's why it's better. Where if you get a package pre-made, it doesn't have the same fresh crunchiness and the texture.
Right.
Well, great, Dave. Thanks so much.
We can make them crunchy as well if you want.
Okay.
Like the cream cheese.
Thanks so much for coming. House of Bagels in Commack, my favorite bagel store. If you haven't had a good bagel like that, go there and check them out for the holidays. They do a great business. And if you want to look it up, you guys have a Facebook page or anything? You just go Good Bagels and you'll have to.
You look up House of Bagels and you'll see the complaints.
Well, that could be your ex-wife or my ex-wife. Now that you're on my show, you'll probably get another one. We'll see everybody next week. If you like what you see, please go ahead and share our show and go online to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. So I have with me here the head baker at House of Bagels, Ed Keller. Ed, how long have you been the baker here at House of Bagels?
About 29 years.
Wow, that's a long time. So you don't sleep a lot, huh?
No, not much.
What time do you get in here in the morning to start the bagel baking process?
At about 11:30 at night.
And how long does it take before all the bagels are done for the day?
Probably till 1:30 in the afternoon we get done.
So I noticed that you're baking bagels throughout the morning. So you don't just make them all and put them in. When somebody buys a bagel, it could have been out of the oven, 10, 15 minutes ago?
Well, they might have just came right out of the oven. We like to keep the bagels fresh daily for our customers so that they're happy. It's nice to have a fresh bagel.
And from your perspective, what makes House of Bagels different than other bagel stores that you're familiar with?
Because we try to do everything for our customers, keep the bagels hot, make fresh product every day. If there's a problem, we always try to accommodate our customers and fix it. And I would say our bagels I'd put them up against anybody else's bagels.
And as I said in the interview in the studio when I was talking with Dave, I consider myself a bagel connoisseur. When I go to a bagel store, I love a fresh hot bagel. I don't want it toast. I want to get it out of the oven hot. Does that piss off the bagel worker when somebody asks them to go in the back and get a hot bagel?
Absolutely not. We like to make sure that our customers get what they like. If they want a hot bagel, we give them a hot bagel. If they want a cold bagel, we might have a cold bagel from the morning, but most of the time our bagels are nice and fresh and hot.
Long Island Backstory is made possible in part by Americans for Legal Reform, the oldest, most successful legal group in the world. P.O. Box 2679, Huntington Station, New York 11746. Telephone 631-421-6390. Website Americans4legalreform.com.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Red hat. Oops. Red shirt, blue shirt, yellow shirt. Oops. Yellow pants, red pants, green pants. Oops.